Welcome to the Family Office Success Podcast, where we explore the strategies, the insights, and the best practices that help families and their advisors build and manage successful family offices. I am your host, Christi Van Rite, and each episode, we dive into the key elements of running a family office. Whether you're a family looking to structure your advisory team for long-term success, or you're a professional managing the complexities of a multi-generational enterprise. From financial oversight and operational efficiency to selecting the right advisors and creating a lasting legacy, this podcast is here to provide practical guidance and expert perspectives. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Family Office Success Podcast, where we talk all things family office. Today, we are talking with Miss Erin Marie Wallace from Gurjohn's, and this is going to be part of a series of episodes that we're doing on auction houses and what do you do it through an auction house? What can you do through an auction house? When should you call an auction house? All of those things that sometimes make this area of our industry feel a little bit like I'm unsure what to do or when to call or what to expect. So we are starting this conversation with Erin Marie because she has a unique take on what we're going to be talking about here based on her background, based on what Gurjohn's does. And so the purpose of this particular podcast is to give you a very high level overview, how do things kind of work in the background. So when you are hopefully going and speaking with an auction house or going to work with someone at an auction house, you've got a little bit better idea of what to expect, what's going to happen, and you can go in feeling much more informed, hopefully, than you were beforehand. So with that intro into the podcast, Erin Marie, thank you so much for being here today. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Christi, thank you for inviting me. I am so happy to be here to talk a little bit about auctions and what they are and when people are using them and what the terms are. If you'd like a little bit of my background.
Yes, please.
I started off with a Bachelor of Fine Art degree. So I have a degree specifically in drawing. It's a great foundational degree, but it's also a really good indication that you might end up going to get a master's degree. I am an artist when I'm not working, but I didn't want that to be my primary profession. So I moved to London and I went to the Sotheby's Institute of Art and received a degree in fine and decorative art and design. And what they're teaching you how to do is appraise something, understand where it was made, how it was made, how to research it for price and for provenance. And that is the degree. So it prepares you to work in an auction house. When I finished my graduate degree, I moved to Florida. I helped people build and sell collections of British pottery and fine art and design. It led to becoming an auctioneer. And then I did that in Florida. And then I became an auction house owner because I'm very literal. So if you go to an auction house for a graduate degree, then you should probably work in the field. Became an auction house owner. I became an auctioneer for about a decade. And in addition to running my own auctions, people would hire me. So I was called a journeyman auctioneer. And I traveled up and down the west coast of Florida, and I would call other people's auctions. So I have a really wide breadth of experience with how many different types of auctions work. That led to running and directing an auction that was outside of Northern Virginia. Great experience, which then led to living in New York and working for the real inside of Manhattan on their trusts and estates team. So the through line with all of these positions is helping people figure out what is something worth, what do you do with it? Do you keep it? Do you sell it? Do you donate it? Are you doing it now? Are you doing it later? Full circle is working for Gurjohn's. Unlike everything else I have ever done, Gurjohn's is what's called an independent appraiser and brokerage firm. So we provide people appraisals. We tell people what things are worth. And we do this for insurance purposes, but also for estate planning and 706. So if you have a taxable estate and you need to appraise the contents, if you're doing donations, loans, or leases, it's fine art, decorative art, collectibles, handbags, anything the IRS thinks is a collectible, we work with. The other thing that we do, and it's the natural extension of telling people what things are worth, is they come back to us and they say, well, now how do I sell it? So we don't buy and sell. So we'll never buy and sell anything, but we leverage all of our relationships from doing appraisals to be able to guide a client through the selling process. And we become the voice of reason through a relatively obtuse process for the client. And so that is the long and short of where I started, how I came to where I am, and why I think I'm a good fit to have this conversation about what is an auction, how do you use an auction, when do you not use an auction, and what are the questions that you should ask?
Okay. So I have questions. Let's talk about this.
Bring it on.
On a high level, what is an auction house? And just sort of like, how does it work? Because I think a lot of people have in their heads that when you say auction house, they think big artwork, they think car collections, they think like there's got to be kind of maybe a certain amount of dollars involved to bring in an auction house, all kinds of things that probably are not always correct. So, what is an auction house?
Oh, an auction house is a great method for people to sell items, sometimes regionally, sometimes internationally. Items are put up for bidding. So it's open bidding to the public, usually by increments. So 100, 150, 200, maybe 5,000, 5,500, 6,000.
Okay.
People are bidding openly for them. It's independently bid upon, and the highest bidder wins the item. Very simple. And it doesn't matter if you are talking about a country auction in the backwoods of Florida and it's being sold directly out of the house. And that is one way these things happen. It doesn't matter if you are talking about a Sotheby's or a Bonhams auction where everything is sold on an international platform with entire marketing platforms behind it. It's all still the same profession. The idea is things are put up for public bidding and the highest bidder wins the item.
You just mentioned 2 or 3 different auction houses. From what I now know through the course of having these conversations is there are a myriad of auction houses. On a high level, everybody's doing the same work. The goal is to move items on the buy side and the sell side. But it seems like there's a little bit different take on it, which you would expect. Regional, international, what they focus on specifically, what they're known for. Tell us a little bit about the differences in these auction houses, because it seems like there's a lot. How do you know what they do?
Okay, I like to split them into 2 different types of houses, and they're different houses for different things. You have a regional auction house, and then you have what I think of as a larger marquee auction house. They do the same thing. They're both selling the same thing. But the difference can be that the larger house has the capacity to do things like single owner sales with an entire marketing campaign behind it. They have the capacity to do things like work with some of the leading bodies to do research into making sure that a piece of artwork is authentic before it goes to sale. That can happen sometimes.
Okay.
They also will negotiate on their terms a little more, and we'll talk about that. Whereas the regional houses are a smaller house. Now, they will tend to take more items. They will take a wider range of items, and they will usually take items that are a little less expensive than the marquee houses. And the reason for that is the larger houses have a lot of pre-costs. They are shipping, they're doing photography, they're doing descriptions. Every one of those jobs is done by a different person. It might be getting shipped from, let's say, Florida to New York or to Boston. There's a lot of cost that goes into that and just setting it up. And so sometimes those marquee houses have to have a tier of value over which they accept. The smaller regional houses can open that up because they have less overhead. There are give and takes. Sometimes they have higher fees, but they have higher fees because inherently the things that they're selling are less expensive. So that's how they're recouping to create balance. In the best world, they are all doing international selling. They are all shipping internationally, and they are all on different technology platforms that allow people to bid on those items from anywhere in the world, even if the auction is in the middle of the state in Florida. So there are some things that they all have that make them equal, but the larger houses just have a really great background to be able to elevate things onto a wider international audience. And so when I'm looking at a collection, I tend to feel like there is rarely one fit for a whole collection. I am thinking of how do we split it? What is appropriate for a marquee and then what is appropriate for a regional house? And we can get into those details, but I think it's also good to go over some of the terms and the things that people are trying. Yeah, the fees, right?
Agreed.
The things that become really obtuse.
Yes. So talk to us a little bit about the terms that somebody is going to hear.
There's 3 or 4, maybe 5 terms that come up that I think people should be really comfortable with. There is a buyer's premium, reserve, commission, buyback. So that's 4 main terms.
Okay.
Your buyer's premium. This is a percentage that the auction house charges you as the consignor for the privilege of selling your object. And it can be standard at this time in life, generally between about 25 to 35%. As an example, if you sell something at an auction for $100 and there is a 25% buyer's premium, the auction house is going to get $25 and then you as the seller are going to receive $75. And that's the way a seller's commission works. So that's part of how the auction house is earning their money from the auction. They're also taking what is called a buyer's commission. So they actually take a percentage of the sale from both directions. So your seller's commission can be $25 to the auction house. And then there can also be a buyer's commission of 25% for the person buying the item, which means that they bought it for $100, but they're paying the auction house $125. Does that make sense?
It does.
So you have the 2 different commissions in both directions. Now, let's say that $100 object, you love it. It was your grandmother's, and you cannot bear the thought of it ever selling for $80. Then you might say to the auction house, we need to put a reserve on it. And a reserve is an agreed upon number between the seller and the auction house that the auction house will not go below. And so for you, that might be the $80 mark. So the auction house will not sell it below that. That will go into your contract. That will be put in writing so that it is definitely held to. But then you might also then be subject to what they call a buyback fee. That buyback fee it can be a percentage or a flat fee per item, so that if the item does not sell, the auction house can recoup their expenses based on that percentage or flat fee of the item that did not sell at auction. Okay. So that's how they ensure that if they put 5-8 hours of work into something in an entire marketing campaign, that they can recoup some of that. And that's called a buyback. And that usually happens because you have a reserve. Exactly. It can be really logical, but if you don't know why those fees are on your contract or understand what they're being used for the auction house,
right,
it can be really obtuse and it can be really jarring to see the contract and not understand some of those terms. Then that leads to the fee terms as well, the things that you can negotiate on. And we see that with things like your seller's commission, shipping, marketing fees, insurance fees, pickup wrapping fees. Generally, those can occasionally be negotiated. This all depends on, this is like my caveat to the whole conversation. It all depends on the kinds of things you want to sell.
Okay.
An auction house will not be inclined to negotiate on percentages if they are not excited about the items that you're bringing them to sell.
That makes sense.
Part of what you're doing is entering into an agreement, no matter what, with that contract that says that they are investing themselves into your items. And generally, the more valuable the items, the more invested they are willing to become.
Okay. So is that where whenever someone is talking to an auction house or talking to someone like you to say, for you to give advice, you talked earlier about potentially splitting up a collection to go to different, is it going to be a regional? Is this going to be a bigger international or a bigger house? Is that why one of the things that flows into your thinking, your methodology of how you would walk a family through this based on who's going to be excited about that item or that lot or that collection and where you might get the most, I guess, value from a house?
That is a big part of it. If I understand what you're saying, it's that it's really important to make sure when you're working with these collections that if you have specialized objects, that you understand which auction houses have a background in selling those objects because they understand what they are. And then the other half of that is they already have a client list for people who collect similar things. And part of their job is to market on your behalf. That's part of what that commission that you're paying is for. And so you align the auction houses and the items. And, an auction house is a little bit of a gamble. You don't really know what something's going to sell for. So this is one of the steps that you can take that helps weight the process in your favor. If the auction house has a background in selling illustration art and you have an amazing illustration, it behooves you to work with that house, or better yet, find 3 houses that have a background in illustration art and then receive a contract from all 3 of them and look at all of the terms and balance them out and have these conversations. A lot of times, personal property can be a really emotional object for people, whether
Sure.
it's a living estate or an estate. And I think if the family has the time to slow down the process and investigate options, it's the best way to feel comfortable about letting something go when you reflect on it 5 years from now.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're comfortable with the person or people who are effectively moving this object to its next ownership and you have something special tied to it, you want to feel good about the process that's about to happen.
It is. And if there's a few ways to do it, but one of them is looking across the board at different similar auction houses and looking at their terms and understanding what the estimates are for your object, and then knowing that you are absolutely making the right decision with the right house based on the terms and the estimates. And that is the best way to make sure that you're never underselling an object, whether you're looking at a marquee auction or you're looking at a regional auction. Then the only real thing that comes down to the equation to me is time versus money. Do you, as the owner, have the time to invest to do this research and legwork?
So I think it's one of the things that you and I have talked about is tying this thread together, that this doesn't have to be what we were calling a fancy experience. These are real people at all of these auction houses. They want to do the best they can for you. It is like anything else, up to you as the family or the seller to figure out who is going to be the best for what you have. But ultimately, the people sitting with you looking at these items, they're people. This is a very human experience, even though from the outside looking in, it may feel a little bit differently.
It does. I think the marketing in the field means that the auctions that you hear about are the top tier marquee auctions, the true white glove selling experiences with the champagne. But the reality is that auctions happen at every tier and for every object, all the way down to the housewares in somebody's kitchen. And the trick to utilizing them correctly is to understand which ones are appropriate for which category, and then
Mm-hmm.
how to have that conversation with them, because they are all human, but you have to understand the nature of their business to be able to create something that's enticing for them to want to collaborate with the collection, because it is a collaboration. It's not the consignor versus the auction house. The two need to work together hand in hand. That needs to be a tandem relationship, not adversarial.
Got it. So it's okay to ask questions. In fact,
You should ask
I'm
questions.
it is encouraged to ask questions to get a
Yes.
feel for what this is going to be, decide if
Yes.
they're the right group for you.
It is the few times that I have found clients that are in difficult positions, it is because they either did not know the questions to ask or did not
Mhm.
understand the answers they were given. They didn't understand what the reserve meant. They didn't understand what the buyback meant. And it was probably in the contract, but they didn't get it. And it probably was in the contract, because all of these auction houses are also governed by the state that they are based out of. So the contracts are real and valid, and it behooves them to put everything in that contract because there is oversight at a higher level. So it's important to either understand everything that you're reading or have somebody helping you through the process who understands everything that you're reading.
I mean, I feel like that is true in so many, across so many things. If there is a contract, you need to read it and you need to ask
Yes.
questions if you don't understand something that's in it, or have someone like your attorney, like your family office, read it to make sure that everything is what you understood it to be.
That's it. That's it.
No
I
matter.
don't cut my own hair. Like I believe that specialists are important. I trust people who are specialists in their field. So,
That's
yes,
right.
I would rather have you reading my contracts.
It's true. You hire specialists for a reason. Use
Yes.
them. Use them. So, okay, so along that same vein, even if someone is talking to multiple houses, everybody has their own lens through which they are marketing their business, or how they, just how they tell you as the consumer what they do. And while there are some terms that kind of go across the board, there's going to be a whole lot of other things that they are telling you, or that, you're having in conversation with them, that if you took those conversations and, across two or three groups that you're talking to, and try to compare them, they're not probably going to be apples to apples, I'm guessing. Sort of like when you're talking to a family office provider, there's family office that does very light work, and then there's family offices that are super deep, and you know but they're kind of using the same words, maybe in a different context. That can be really hard for a family or a consumer to parse out. Well, they said this and they said that, and so you must be the same, when that's not actually the case. So what are some of the things that, when a family is talking to a house, or a couple of houses, to try and figure out who should they go with, who's going to get the most excited about these items, these collections, what are some of the things that they maybe should be listening for, or like red flags maybe that they should keep in mind whenever they're talking to one of these groups?
This is such a good question, because every auction house is so individual, and there really are very few through lines other than some of the terms that we've been over.
Okay.
I think one of the absolute best ways is to, as you're going through the process, request contracts and see what they actually state in writing about their
Okay.
terms. Ask if they have a sample contract, even if it leaves out some key percentages, just to see what their terms are. I would look for things like abandonment clauses or buyback fees. An abandonment clause would mean that maybe it didn't sell. What happens to that item? Are you, as the owner, are you paying for it? Is it disposed of? How does that work? So you And
Hmm.
then because every auction house is different, this is why I say that it makes a lot of sense to speak to more than one, because you put the contracts side by side and you try to create apples to apples comparisons. There are some things that will follow through. That will be the seller's commission, that will be pickup, packing, and shipping. Insurance fees, potentially marketing and buyback fees will probably be noted in every contract. If it's not, it's a great opportunity to do a follow up email. What about this? And those for me become my pink flags, because I always question if you've left out crucial information when you've sent it to me as a business owner. Why are you leaving out something that I know is crucial?
Sure.
That's another reason to get more than one, because if you've not gone through this process before, how do you know that the one you're looking at is good? You have to have a basis for comparison,
That's right.
right? And we haven't even started talking about value. We're just talking about a contract and houses. So you want more than one to look at. And then the other thing, this is so basic, go onto their website, navigate the website, follow some auctions, look at how they photograph the objects, look at how they describe the objects, look at how many people are bidding on the objects, because they could be your objects. So make sure that you understand how they're doing that part of the process and that you're really comfortable with that part of the process, because it could be your objects. And that's such a basic thing. And then another really basic one is sign into one of their auctions. I'm not saying bid on anything. You sign into it to see how easy it is for a bidder to sign in. So the idea with most people are bidding online now, that number has continued to rise since it was rising pre-pandemic, but now we're just there. It will never go backwards.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure that the house that you're working with is removing barriers for potential bidders to bid. And then you also want to see, how are they accepting bids? Do they only have an online auction, which is fine, perfectly fine. But then you're also looking to see, would they accept a phone bid? Would they accept a left bid? Is it a live auction or only online? And so you were researching all of these things. And if you're really organized, create an Excel spreadsheet. And then you really are looking at an apples to apples comparison. But these are all of the little levers I think of that you need to look at when you're interviewing auction houses to handle your items.
Okay. So one of the things I'm curious, because one of the things that
Mhm.
we talk to whenever we're talking to families about family office work is one of the first things I ask them is, what are you trying to accomplish with this phone call? What are you trying
Mhm.
to suss out? You should be talking to multiple firms. What are you asking? What is your end goal? What is the end result that if we're sitting here 12 months, 3 years from today, you needs to have happened for you to look back and say, that was the right fit. I made a great decision by choosing insert firm here. So
Mhm.
is that something that, similar to our side, that you would encourage, that a family should know what outcome they're trying to achieve even before they start having conversations with houses?
I think so, because I think there's always a goal when you start. And if you're working with a family office, there is a financial reason why you're working with that family office.
Sure.
And I feel like if you're thinking of deaccessioning works, then your conversation actually needs to loop in your family office team, your insurance team, your money managers. And the reason for that is because if you deaccession something that is on your insurance schedule, well, you want your insurer to know about it so you could take it off the schedule, right? Why pay for something you don't have? As somebody who works
Absolutely.
for an appraisal firm, I work with a lot of clients doing insurance appraisals. And as we go through the process, I will find out that something was gifted or donated, or it's in the daughter's house and has been for 10 years. And no one knew it. And so they're paying for it over and over again. So you need your insurance person. And then you need your financial services people, because you don't know the tax implications of what you're getting ready to do. And they should be part of the beginning of the conversation. And that's a big part of, like, we could do a whole conversation on that. That is the team that helps you understand your tax implications, helps you understand how you're using the artwork. They're the people that might suggest another direction depending on the person who's selling's end goal. Maybe the goal is to raise funds for some family fill in the blank here. Maybe selling that artwork isn't the right way to do that. And that family member will not know that unless they loop in their team. I don't think this process should be done in a silo. I particularly sense a lot of the people who are going through the process haven't done it before. I think you have to bring in the wider group that's working with you to be able to do it successfully because they understand the implications that the auction house might not even know to ask. The insurance is a big one. The minute it's picked up, take it off the schedule. But if you don't know to do it, you don't know to do it.
I will tell you that is a big part of when we're doing insurance reviews and we're trying to stay on top of the items that are in a family's home, no matter what they are. I can't tell you how many times I've walked in to the ranch, been like, there was a picture above the fireplace last time I was here. You've changed it. It looks great. What happened to that one? You know what? Actually, we gave it to our son for it to go into their home. And I'm like, note to self, that needs to come off of your insurance. It needs to go on his because the insurance company legitimately is going to say, if something happens to that piece and it's not where they thought it was, that's different. And that is absolutely a reason for them to not cover a claim potentially. So that's a bit of a squirrel side note for everyone. You need to be keeping
but
up with.
It's very true. Yeah.
It's true. And I can't even tell you how many. And they're like, oh yeah, we moved it. It's, it went to the Florida house and it was in the, it was in the Kansas City house. Well, the Florida house is a very different insurance animal than the Kansas City house is.
Oh my gosh, it would be. It really would
Totally.
be. And then if something happens, where did it happen? What time did it happen? And what policy was it under?
100%.
And that's why we have a team. Again, this is why I don't cut my own hair. I have somebody who knows what they're doing. All I do is schedule it, right? And then I just sit in the chair and I let it happen. I think when our clients have a good team that surrounds them, all they have to do is sit in the chair and let it happen. And that's the way it should be because a lot of these collections, while not everything is a marquee level item, everything deserves to be treated with the same level of respect and oversight as a marquee level item.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of touched on this, but kind of that role of the independent advisor or an intermediary inside this auction process. I think your analogy of you don't cut your own hair, and sometimes when you do, because you're like, I can't take it, it just needs a trim, and you do it, and then you're like, oh, shoot. Yeah, should have just made that appointment. Versus going and sitting in the chair and they say, all right, how you feeling? Where are we going? And then you start, you kind of give ideas and maybe you have pictures and then you let that person take the wheel because they're the professional. So kind of a recap, because we've kind of talked about this throughout this conversation. What are some of those things, those reasons why, while a family could absolutely go directly to a house, you can do these comparisons yourself. You can talk to multiple houses. What are some of the shortcuts or benefits to using an intermediary when a family is going through this process, either something's going to happen or this is post something happening? I'm going to say post a death in the family a lot of times is what precipitates some of these things. And not everybody is always in their best frame of mind in that time. So what are some of the things that working with an intermediary or an advisor specific to this can be helpful?
So I think there's two different kinds of clients, but I think both can benefit from having an advisor at different times. There is a client who understands their collection because they have been the primary person buying and selling. And maybe they've been buying and selling at auction. So they're very comfortable working in what I call a secondary market scenario. And they're very comfortable with the concept of what is fair market value, which is the value you're seeing at an auction, as
Okay.
opposed to what we were just talking about with insurance. Totally different value. That person already knows all of these terms because they've been on both sides of the chair. They've been buying and selling. So they have a foundation and they are probably fine 90% of the time. And then there's the other person, and that is probably a family, and they might have inherited a lot of things and they don't know what they've inherited. Or
Mhm.
maybe they have built their own wealth and they've been buying things so voraciously that they haven't ever inventoried it and they've ended up with just a lot of everything. And there's a really good space for an advisor for that client as well. Because when you have a large collection, really the first thing you need to do is sit down and break it down categorically. And you need to sit down and really think about these are the paintings, these are the artists, maybe there's furniture, maybe there's jewelry, maybe there's watches. And we want to think about it categorically. And this is where an advisor is very good, an independent advisor, because they can look at every auction house and every selling venue in the field. And that might even include a private collector or two, but let's focus specifically on auctions. And because they're independent, they're not connected to any of the houses. So they can pull a proposal from every house that has estimates, a high less estimate, a low estimate, and a starting price. And then they can go back to those houses and they can negotiate on the fees. And the fees would be the seller's commission, shipping, marketing, any kind of insurance, maybe packing fees as well. The other thing that an independent can do that an individual cannot do is I think of someone like Gurjans. The company's been around since 1914. They've been working with all of these auction houses since before I was born. So there are relationships that go back before I ever even stepped in the door. And those are the relationships that the company relies on when they're working with clients for brokerage that me as an individual walking into Sotheby's do not have the same access to. So when
Mm.
we're looking at a whole collection, right? Like, and so if we have already as a company consigned to several of these houses under our own company name, then the next consignment that comes in is just another negotiating point to the greater total. So it
Interesting.
becomes the sum of the individuals becomes the greater total because it gives us more leverage in the conversations.
Hmm.
Something that as an individual, you would have to really buy and sell a lot to hit that tier with these houses. But because we're working with large collections and individual collectors all the time, we have the ability to have those conversations. We're not the only independent broker, but this is who I work for. So that's why I'll use everything in the first person as I talk about it. But we're not the only one that does it. But this is what the job is. This is part of the strength of having somebody come in. And then one other really important one, privacy. I think privacy is a big one for families. We become a buffer. So we follow all know your client regulations because we're an
Okay.
international company, right? So everything is very legal and straight and narrow, but we're a buffer. So everyone at the auction house is dealing with Gurjans. They have no idea on the day-to-day basis who the client is behind me that I represent. At a corporate level, yes, but on the day to day, no. And there are a lot of clients who don't want anyone to know what they're selling. And we are
Absolutely.
a wonderful choice for that. And then an independent advisor will also handle everything that has to do with invoicing, payments. What if something gets broken in transit? Who handles that conversation? The advisor will. That way the owner does it. And when that happens, you end up in these conversations with the insurers. So then it goes a whole different direction, and an independent advisor will handle all of that. And that's where I think they're
Amazing.
really helpful. And then they can also come back to the client and have what I think of as like the kiss or cry conversations. The kiss conversations when something has gone much better than anyone could have ever imagined. And the cry conversations when you have to explain to them why it's not appropriate to sell at this time. And that's part of the advisor job. And I think of it as it is the cut your own hair analogy. It's a family office analogy. It's a whole vertical. It's a job unto itself. So unless you're really comfortable with it or you're really eager to jump into it, it does make sense to bring somebody in to help you through the process.
Okay. So I think one of the things about a family having an advisory team, yes, you are still looking at the buyer's commission, the seller's commission, the marketing, the insurance. You are still
Mhm.
looking at those. And yes, you are paying an advisor, a consultant, a professional to help oversee this process with you. But at the end of the day, if you get a better outcome, it's hard to
Why
say that it
wouldn't
wasn't
you?
worth it.
And I think an advisor, I think when everything goes really well, the advisor has negotiated their percentage away because they're negotiating on the commission or any one of the other terms with the house. And then it really becomes a win win because the liaison for the house is somebody who does this and knows what they're doing and knows the conversations already.
Sure.
The owner gets to step away making at least as much as they would have before, but they don't have to do anything now. And then the house wins because they're getting not everything, but they're getting the refined group of what they can sell successfully that's going to make them look good to the consigner, too.
Sure.
So it can really be this win win situation for everyone that's like a graceful dance when it's put together well.
I love that. That's really what we do as professional advisors, professional consultants. We help coordinate the dance. I love that.
Yes. There's a space for us to negotiate away the price of our dance
Sure.
or come close to it. You almost can get a free dance with us sometimes. It depends on the objects. But this is where something you said way at the beginning of our conversation. It comes down to communication. And you can also, in the same way you're having this conversation with multiple auction houses, you can also have this conversation with an advisor and say, this is what I have. What's it look like to you? So you can do that across the board and become an informed seller, no matter which direction you go in.
I love that. Okay, I have one last question and then we are going
Mhm.
to wrap this conversation up. What is the range of, I'm guessing it's in dollar form. What is the range where it makes sense, pun intended, to use an auction house for whatever the object? We think about the Monets and the Van Goghs, and like you said, those are those ones that you hear about in the news because they sold for an incredible amount of money, or they traded for an incredible amount of money. But kind of on the lower end, if a family is walking around their mother's or their grandmother's home or their grandfather's shop, and they're thinking about like these collections might be worth something, what do they do? What's that lower, kind of on that lower end, where someone would say, it might be worth having a conversation to see if it's worth it or
Mhm.
not?
I think the first thing an owner can do is that's really simple and almost free is to create an inventory. Really simple. A
Okay.
photograph and then an Excel spreadsheet that says, what is it? Is it oil on canvas? What are the dimensions? Is it 2 inches by 3 inches or 2 feet by 3 feet? Because scale is important. If you have an inventory of the objects, then it makes these conversations really easy because you can have them from sitting at home in front of your laptop. All of us now are so remote. And even my profession, which is an ancient profession, appraising and brokering has been around forever, but we're finally in the 21st century and we even text now. It's amazing, let me tell you. So you can text with us. Like we're not just abacus anymore. It's very cool. And so if you have that inventory, you can now have the conversation with maybe a couple of auction houses, maybe
Okay.
carefully with a broker, and I would also caution against throwing this out everywhere. You want to be very thoughtful with what you're doing.
Huh?
Nobody likes to see something shopped around. It cheapens the experience. So there are so many different little nuances here to bring up, but an inventory is a great place to start, because then you could even sort it by category. And then maybe you're looking at just the Asian objects. You find a way to refine it. And that's where I would start if you're like, well, what do I do now? How do I start this conversation? And then that can lead to things like in-person examinations, which could lead to consignment contracts between the auction house or an independent advisor. But I think it all starts with knowing not the value of what you have, but just knowing what you have and being able to share it with the other entities, right? To get an independent opinion of now what is it worth. And as just a small asterisk, because you don't get to tell them what it's worth, they tell you. And it's based on where have they sold similar objects before. And so it's real world numbers, which have nothing to do with the emotional connection of the aunt that gave you the vase. But they will come back to you and they will give you those numbers. And then you are informed and you get to decide if you want to move forward.
That makes so much sense. And I appreciate you ending on that note as a reminder to people that the value of an object is worth what someone else is willing to pay for it at the end of the day.
If we are talking about auctions and fair market value, you're 100% correct. If we're going into insurance, let's have a new podcast and talk about that. But just to be specific, you're absolutely correct. It is fair market value. It is what someone's willing to pay for it at the time.
Okay. Which is why sometimes you might get the advice, now's not a good time to liquidate this piece or to try and move this.
It absolutely goes back and forth. The market changes all the time.
Erin Marie, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been great. I think this is a great overview to just get people thinking about what they can do, how they can, when they come across collections, when it's time to think about selling or you're looking to buy something. I feel like this conversation works just as much on the other side, the buy side, as it does the sell side, things to keep in mind and what's your ultimate goal and what the objects are, those kinds of things. So this was a fantastic setup for these conversations to continue. So thank you so very much for your time and your wisdom and giving us a bit of an insight about what this industry looks like, and that it is quite approachable. You just need to know some of the lay of the land and how it works.
You have it absolutely correct. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for giving me the platform to be able to talk about this.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great one.
You too.
Thank you for joining me today on the Family Office Success Podcast. I hope you found this conversation insightful and valuable as you navigate the complexities of family office services. If you're looking for more ideas or resources or want to explore how we can support your family office or your family through services and training and strategy, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit our website at whiteriverconsultants.com, and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates and expert insights. And if you're ready to take your family office to the next level, consider joining our mastermind, where we can help you manage that chaos and create better outcomes for the families you serve. Until next time, I'm Christi Van Rite, and this has been the Family Office Success Podcast. Take care and keep building for the future.